Do you know the meaning of your name? Oh, yes, people said yes. I'd like to hear about it. Many times, when our parents give us our names, they're giving us some characteristic they would like us to have. Take my name, for example, Nelson. It says, the son of a champion. Wow, I like that. I'm the son of a champion. Champion of what? I don't know. But it makes me feel like this. Where in the world does he get all those yellow shirts? I do not know. But you get the meaning, right? If you have a very wonderful name, it makes you feel noble, powerful, wise, beautiful, a person of great value. But it can go the other way as well. Can you imagine being saddled with a horrible name? And today we're going to see a man just that, who was given a name with unsavory connotations. We're going to talk about Jacob, and our story begins in Genesis 25. There's this couple, Isaac and Rebekah. And Rebekah became pregnant with twin boys, and even within the womb, those two boys were jostling against each other. The time came when Rebekah gave birth, and the first baby to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau, meaning hairy. Then, no doubt to their surprise, the second baby came out grasping Esau's heel. So they named him Jacob. Now, the name Jacob soon after had a negative connotation. It went to mean deceiver. Why is that? Well, imagine two people in a race. One is ahead of the other. And the one behind wanted to win, so he would reach down and grab the heel of the man in front of him. And the runner ahead would stumble, and the man behind, the heel grabber, would zoom past him and get the prize. And that's why, soon enough, the name Jacob got the meaning of deceiver, cheat, con man, swindler. Can you imagine growing up with that kind of a name? Hey, don't look now. Here comes heel grabber. Watch your wallets. Why do they call you heel grabber again? Or, hey, Jake, have you grabbed any heels lately? Now, if there's anyone in this congregation whose name is Jacob, I beg for your forgiveness. We're talking about the original Jacob as the biblical world knew him. And so it's going to be a wonderful turn of events, I promise you. And the sermon will be in two major parts. Part 1 will be how Jacob grabbed blessings. Part 2 will be how Jacob gained blessings. So let's proceed with the story. So the twin boys, they grew up as different as night and day. Esau grew up and became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man, staying among the tents. Now the problem arose when the parents played favorites. Isaac, the father, had a taste for wild game. He loved to eat cooked wild animals, maybe deer or antelope, and Esau was the hunter who would bring it to him. And so guess what? Isaac loved Esau. Now, Jacob, I don't know, probably staying among the tents, swapping recipes, picking berries, perhaps, and that's why Mama deer prefers Jacob. So Rebekah loved Jacob. Can you imagine how it must have been like during dinner time? So Isaac would be in this table, and Esau comes from a hunt and captures wild game, cooked it, roasted it, and presented the most succulent portion to his dad. And the dad would merrily chomp at his favorite meal. And then he would dart a glance at Jacob. See, that's what a son should be like, a man's man. Why can't you be like him? And then Esau would tell a tall tale about his hunting expedition, and Isaac would laugh out loud. And Jacob would try feebly to enter into the banter, but all he got from Papa was a grunt. And then Jacob would look at his mom, Rebekah, and Rebekah could only look back in pity. And by this time, Esau and Isaac must have been chugging wine together, an unabashed display of male bonding. And Jacob would look down in shame, and deep inside, no doubt, would well up envy, resentment, obsession. He wants to be Esau. But he bites his lip, he bids his time until the next opportunity. And so the first opportunity came in when one day Esau came from an empty-handed hunt and he saw Jacob cooking stew. And Esau said, "Quick, I'm famished. Give me some of that red stew." And then Jacob seized the opportunity and says, "First, sell me your birthright." And then Esau said, "Behold, I'm about to die. What use is my birthright to me?" And so Esau swore an oath and sold Jacob his birthright. Jacob gave him some bread and stew. Esau ate and left, and that's it. The Genesis writer said, "And so Esau despised his birthright." Now, what's the big thing about birthright in those days? Well, it carries the privileges of the firstborn. When the father dies, the firstborn would get the family name and title. Not only that, when the father dies, the firstborn would get doubled up inheritance over all his brothers. In a spiritual aspect, remember, God made a covenant with Abraham, and that covenant would extend to Isaac and should extend to Esau. But because Esau sold his birthright, today we're talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In some parallel universe, they were talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. And so that's how serious it was to have a birthright. And Esau sold it to Jacob for just a pot of stew. And so Jacob got round one. He got what he wanted. He wanted to be Esau. He got his birthright. In round two, okay, one day, by this time, Isaac was so old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see. And so one day he summoned his favorite son, Esau. "Quick, behold, the days of my death are coming. I don't know when I'm going to die. So go out, get your gear, go to the half-open country, give me some of those game and cook the meal so I eat it before I die and give you my blessing." And so Esau went on the hunt. And Mama dear, Rebecca, was eavesdropping on a conversation. And so she summoned her favorite son, Jacob. "Do what I say. Go get 2 choice goats from the flock. I'm going to cook it just the way your dad likes it, and you'll serve it to him and get the blessing." But there was a hitch. Remember, Esau was as hairy as a rug, while Jacob's skin was smooth like a baby bottom. And so if Isaac would touch his skin and notice it's him, the jig would be up. He'll be raining curses rather than blessing. But Mama got that covered as well. So what did she do? She made Jacob put on Esau's best clothes and put goat skins on the neck and on the arms. And therefore, with tasty dish and fake hair, Jacob goes in to the father. And then, notice now the conversation. Jacob goes in, "My father." Isaac says, "Yes, my son. Who is it?" Now notice the first lie. Jacob said, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." And Isaac must have been wondering, "So soon? How in the world did you find so quickly, my son?" And then perhaps Jacob had to improvise quickly and use his father's religion against him. The second lie, "The Lord your God gave me success." And Isaac said, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." And so Isaac touched the goat skins. And then he said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Are you really my son Esau? Really? Cross your heart and hope to die?" And then probably Jacob wanted to bolt away, but he was already in it too deep. So he gives the third lie, "I am." By this time, Rebekah's home cooking must have gotten better of Isaac's better judgment. So he said, "Okay, my son, give me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing." And so Isaac consumes the meal. And we don't know how long it took. And can you imagine how Jacob must have felt? Perhaps all the while his heart has been pounding. What if the real Esau comes in? And then he probably wishes that he can just call the whole thing up, but it's already too late. And then he would pour wine into his father's cup, and he would drink until at long last, Isaac finishes the meal and tells, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." The impostor kisses the father. And then we go into Isaac's blessing on Jacob. It's so beautiful. Let's look at it all. The smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. And then Jacob finally got what he wanted, the father's blessing as well. Mission accomplished. The very first instance of identity theft. No, really, identity theft. And then the text says that just after Jacob leaves, the real Esau showed up. And then Esau would bring his wild game. My father, sit up, please, and eat my meal so that you may give me your blessing. And Isaac says, Who? Who are you? And Esau says, I am Esau, your firstborn. And Isaac began to tremble, like he's going to have a seizure or something. Then, who was it who brought me hunted game, and I ate it, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed? And Esau instantly realized what had just happened. And he gave this bitter howl. Bless me too, my father, bless me. And Isaac said, behold, I already have given your brother's blessing. By blessing to your brother. He came in deceitfully, and I have blessed him. And then Esau said, do you have any one more blessing for me? Reserve for me. Please bless me, my father. And then Isaac also said, I have already made him lord over you and sustained him with new wine and grain. What more can I give you, my son? And at this point, you may think that Isaac could have negated the blessing he gave to Jacob, because after all, didn't Jacob got it out of false pretenses? But in that culture, they believed that the father's blessing had power of good and evil over the sons, carried the same pronouncement as it from God himself, and therefore they believed it cannot be negated nor transferred. And so Isaac was already in dismay, and Esau would say, bless me too, my father, bless me, just one, give me just one blessing. And Isaac gave him some blessing, but it was a pale reflection of the one he gave to Jacob. And take note now what Esau said. It gives you the explicit reference about the name of Jacob. Isn't he rightly called Jacob? He has deceived me these 2 times. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. And so what happened was that Esau calmed down, but not because of some blessing, but he was already consoling himself. The days of mourning for my father are near, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. Now Rebekah got to hear about this. Makes you wonder where she gets her intel. And so she told Jacob, now go, flee to my home country, and I'll even provide a cover story. So they made it appear that Jacob was to go to her mother's place in Haran. Haran is 550 miles away. And so Jacob leaves the home. And it makes you wonder whether it was really all worth it. Yes, remember, Jacob wanted to be Esau. And he got his brother's birthright and the father's blessing. But it destroyed or damaged his relationship with his brother, and it made him leave his parents. Again, was it really worth it? And at this point, let's see also how it would apply to us. Application number 1 would be here. Part 1, Jacob grabbed blessing by assuming a false name. Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. And the question is this, are we living under some kind of a false name? Perhaps some of us are longing for Father's blessing. And yet maybe we have fathers who are absent, maybe not literally, but emotionally. Or maybe something happened, and something indescribably sacred and precious is gone forever. Or maybe, like Jacob, we loathe ourselves. Okay? We are told that we're beautiful, but when we see ourselves in the mirror, we see ourselves as ugly. Or when we're told that we are smart, we see ourselves as stupid. And therefore, we see somebody more good-looking, more talented, wiser, smarter, richer, and we want his or her name. Or perhaps also like we want to be blessed, we want to be number one, and we think the only way we can do it was like Jacob, was to exploit other people's weaknesses. And so we would manipulate, we would flatter, we would undermine, we will take credit for some other guy's work, and we wonder why our relationships are hurting. Maybe this one, that we are like Jacob, that we're pretending to be somebody we are not. Maybe we're projecting the image of a person who has all together. But we dread the time when our mask would fall off, and people will see us as who we really are. Anxious, worried sick of the future, bitter, disillusioned with life. And we have our false names. But there's good news, as we can see later. Meantime, remember before we go to part 2, remember that Jacob went to Haran, and there was an interlude of 20 years. And to make this sermon short, we're going to summarize those 20 years. They're all in Genesis chapter 28 to 32. As you know, Jacob went to Haran and fell head over heels in love with gorgeous gal Rachel, the daughter of Laban. To marry Rachel, Jacob made a deal with Laban. I'll work for you as a shepherd for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, there was the wedding night, but Laban substituted Rachel with her plain-looking older sister, Leah. And the morning after, Jacob would wake up and see, Leah! The second instance of identity theft. And then Laban said, if you want Rachel as well, work for me for another 7 years. And the deceiver Jacob has been outsmarted. Have you noticed? And then after those 14 years, Jacob wanted to take his wives and by then 11 sons and go back home. But Laban wanted him to stay. And so therefore Jacob made a deal with Laban. And the deal is a bit too complicated to explain here. Suffice to say, that enabled Jacob to manipulate the reproduction, the breeding of Laban's flock, so that eventually he became rich at Laban's expense. So the weak animals went to Laban's flock, the strong animals went to Jacob, and furthermore, Jacob grew so exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and made servants and men servants and camels and donkeys. And as you can imagine, Jacob's relationship with Laban went sour. Even Laban's sons were saying, look, Jacob has already gotten all the wealth that belonged to our father. And Genesis writer said, Laban's attitude to him was not what it used to be. And so what to do? God intervened, and God told him to go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob picked up his family, all his wealth, and went back. Wait a minute. Went back home? You remember who was there? Esau, the brother whom he had hoodwinked, bamboozled, and swindled. And so now comes Jacob's next move. He sent out messengers perhaps to feel the waters. And so the messengers came back and gave him some sort of a good news, bad news. Jacob, the good news is we went to your brother Esau. He's coming to meet you. The bad news is that he's bringing along 400 men. 400 men! What else could it be but an army to wipe him out? And so then Jacob begins to think, what can I do? He begins to scheme. So scheme number 1 is to spread out the risk. Okay? It's like business. You don't put your eggs in one basket. So we are told, in great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into 2 groups and all his flock, so that if Esau would come and attack one group, the other group will still escape. The sly scoundrel. After that, however, we begin to see a change of heart when Jacob began to pray. This is significant because, look, if you think that you can get along through your own devices, you don't need to pray. Prayerlessness is essentially telling God, Lord, I can handle this, thank you very much. But notice now Jacob's prayer. Remember, he was in great fear and distress. O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I'll make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I only had my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I become two groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. For you have said, I will surely make you prosper and make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. See now the transformation of Jacob. First is that he admitted he was unworthy. Before he would say, I am entitled to this blessing. I deserve it. And so he would grab it. Now he says, I'm not worthy. And he would now acknowledge it is God's graciousness. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. No longer does he have to depend on himself, but it has to come from God. And most of all, he is counting on God's promise. Lord, you have said you'll be with me, you'll protect me, you'll prosper me. I have no place to go. I have nothing else to do to manipulate. I'm totally in your hands. You better keep your promise because if not, I am dead. That's Jacob right now. But still, old habits die hard. He still went to scheme plan number 2. Plan number 2, he would soften up, butter up the enemy. And so what he would do, he would get a large amount of animals from his flock and send them ahead through his servants to Esau. And notice the way he coached the servants to say, these belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau and is coming behind us. What was his plan? I will pacify him with these gifts. Where's the emphasis? I. The message was, Esau, I'm no longer a threat to you. I know what I've done to you was terrible, and I hope these animals would make up for it. I hope we will let bygones be bygones. But even then, there was no guarantee it will succeed because it says, later when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. Now, we don't know why, but later on, after sending the gifts, after dividing the camp into 2 groups, Jacob then sent everybody ahead, and he was left there all alone. It was night, he was alone, it was dark. And that comes now where we are in this main text. And this is a very puzzling text. Okay? Scholars have been debating upon through all the centuries. But what will be helpful for you and me is to read it in entirety and also let certain aspects speak for themselves. So let's read the whole text together. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Then the man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it's because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. And so now you see the cycle. Part 1, Jacob grabbed blessing. How? By having a false name. I am Esau, your firstborn. In part 2, Jacob gained blessing by admitting his true name. What is your name? Jacob. And he was awarded a new name. Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel. And then he blessed him there. This is an interesting development. Jacob, at first, we've seen his name means heel catcher, figuratively deceiver. His new name became Israel, meaning God rules or God strives. And Peniel means the face of God. And so now we come to this point wherein, so, what is the meaning of this story and how does it relate to our lives? Well, there are 2 questions. Where is your Peniel? And what is your name? The first thing we notice is that Jacob was left alone. Remember, it was night. He sent everybody, his family, all his maidservants, all the flock ahead, and he was left alone. It was dark. And similarly, when we are in a situation, when our stage of our lives, it is dark and alone and empty, we are in our Peniel. Are you at the stage right now where you try to look ahead in your future and all you see is darkness? Are you in a place right now wherein you look for somebody who cares and you look around and there seems to be nobody there? You're alone. Are you in a stage right now where all your cleverness, all your resources come to nothing? In fact, you are at the end of your rope. God is reserving Peniel to do his best work in your lives. The second one will be a man came to wrestle with him, not the other way around. Here's one clue to understand the passage. It's observation. Notice it is not Jacob who went to the man. It's the man who went to Jacob. The man went to him and wrestled with him. And by the way, somebody would ask, wait a minute. It says a man came to wrestle, and then later on, Jacob would say it was God himself. Which is which? Was there a contradiction? The best and simplest explanation is that the Genesis writer was recording Jacob's thought process. At first, he thought his opponent was a man. Then somewhere in the wrestling came the dawning realization it was God himself, God in temporal human form. And then it was literally a physical wrestling. There are several people who say, it's really actually Jacob, he's all here by himself, he's just crying out to God in prayer, or he's just wrestling with his conscience, or somebody even suggested assassin. Okay? Maybe Esau sent somebody to rub him out. But the best explanation would be literal, because at the end, you have Jacob sustaining a physical injury. Meaning, if you were to travel back in time and look at them, you'll see two figures. And this is where it is going to be astounding to us, like what the choir said, that even though we fall, we let God down, God still comes to us. Can you imagine God can say something like this? Jacob, you brought this mess to yourself. You should be stewing in your circumstances. But no, I'm going to go to you and deal with you. Not to destroy you, but to redeem you. And even then, that is an act of grace. Are you feeling some sort of restlessness? Are you feeling that God is dealing with you? God is going to jab a finger at your false name? And maybe then God is doing it out of grace rather than leaving you to your own devices. And God is wrestling with you right now. The third one will be this. Jacob overcame by clinging desperately to God's mercy. And here comes another question. How can a mere mortal overcome God himself? Well, the second way to understand this scripture is to look at another part of scripture that will talk about this event. Yes, there is such a passage. It's in Hosea chapter 12. In the womb, he grabs his brother's heel. As a man, he struggled with God. He struggled with God and overcame him. He wept and begged for his favor. So you may think of it like this. Yes, God came in temporary human form. Jacob wrestled with him. He fought as a man. And then sooner or later, he's not ordinary man. It's God himself. And I'm going to ask, God, please, please don't let me go. I beg of you. I'm in great fear and distress. Help me with Esau. And yes, please, please, big picture, give me your favor. I'm asking for a blessing. I will not let you go unless you bless me. And even when God tried to disable him with his hip, all Jacob could do was to cling desperately, even in tears. And then daybreak came, and finally, we see the story of Peniel in all its entirety. Peniel brings us to admit who we really are. It also bids us to abandon our hurtful ways. And it brings us to adhere to God's grace. In other words, confession, repentance, and faith. Be aware of the teaching that says, you want to be blessed? Just have faith. And yet do not address the issue of sin, confession, and repentance. Why? There was a cost for Jacob. What was it? Remember the man said, what is your name? And Jacob said, Can you imagine how painful it is? I am heel grabber. My name is deceiver, manipulator, liar. Can you imagine how painful it was for Jacob to admit that? And then God, out of his marvelous grace, gave him a new name. And so now we come to the point where you and I will face our own Peniel and wrestle with God himself. What is your name? And God will give you a new name. Perhaps there are some of you who are sorrowful. You know, you're at the end of your rope, your resources are gone, you can do nothing but despair. You don't know if you want to live for another day. But you know what? As I said to people, you do not let your pain draw you away from God. You let your pain bring you to God. And there's this wonderful Psalm 30 that says, weeping will come in the night, but joy, the daybreak, comes in the morning. And so, may your name be no longer be sorrowful, but your new name is singing. And may God bless you here at daybreak. Perhaps you are wanting. Your savings are gone. You don't know where to turn. And you feel like you might as well roll over and die. But you know, in Psalm 23, if you make God your shepherd, you will not want. He will lead you to green pastures and still waters. He will restore your soul. And therefore, may your old name no longer be wanting, but your new name be satisfied. And may God bless you here at daybreak. Perhaps you are broken. You are looking for love. Yeah, everybody's looking for love, but you're looking for it in all the wrong places. And perhaps you're feeling now exploited, damaged, discarded, and you're broken. But perhaps also, this is God's invitation to you. You know, come to me because I am the specialist. God is the specialist to bring the broken pieces together, but you have to give him the broken pieces. And may your name be no longer be broken, but your new name is whole. And may God bless you here at daybreak. And perhaps related to that, you feel that you're unloved. You know, only Friday, as Pastor Steve would say, that I write books and readers would email me. Only last Friday, I had this email from a woman. And she said, my boyfriend of 4 years cheated on me and went with another woman. I fought for that relationship, but he pushed me away. And the email ended with, when will the pain ever stop? And so I would also counsel her, and I gave her at least this thing. You know, don't base your self-worth on how you yourself or other people see you. See yourself the way God sees you. And God has shown his love for you through the cross. And therefore, if you were to also be utterly satisfied with God's love, that may your name no longer be unloved, but beloved, and may you be blessed, and may this day be your daybreak. And this gives you now the final form, that God has shown us his love through the cross, and this is where true blessing comes in. It is a mistake to think that the only blessings there are material. But you know what? God wants to have himself to you as the greatest blessing. He wants to give you himself, to have a relationship with him for all eternity. And how do you do it? Well, you have an old name and a new name. Look at this one. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Yet to all who receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Do you want this blessing to have God himself, that you may enjoy eternity, basking in his love, enjoying him forever? May your name no longer be sinner, unable to save yourself, doomed to a godless eternity. But when you put your faith in the name of all other names, Jesus Christ, receiving him, believing, he will give you a new name, child of God, new creation, redeemed, heir of God, co-heirs of God. And I'm just getting started. And if you want to learn more about it, approach the pastor or prayer minister or me in between services. You want to learn more about how to have this new name. But here's one more round. It will totally blow your mind. When you are blessed by God, it doesn't mean you have no more problems. After Peniel, Jacob had problems still. But you know what? There's this fantastic blessing at the other end of the book, Revelation. It says here, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes all those difficulties and trials and still cling to God in His grace, I will also give him a white stone with a new name written on it, only known to him who receives it. Wow! I don't know about you, but I look forward to that white stone with my own name. And I'm going to ask him, what's the meaning of this new name? It's going to be our secret forever. Yeah. And that is where our prayer is, that for us, we will have a new name. Let us conclude with this rest of the story. Whatever happened to Jacob after Peniel? Well, what happened was that Jacob got up. It was daybreak the following morning. The people in the herds went ahead to meet Esau. Jacob went ahead. And as he saw Esau coming to him, Jacob knelt, bowed down to the ground 7 times. And remember, he was limping. And when Esau saw him, instead of swooping into the attack, what Esau did was to ran to him, embraced him, and kissed him. And they wept. You know, the fantastic thing was that God was already at work in behalf of Jacob. He was already working in Esau so that God, out of His grace, even blessed Esau so that it drained Esau's need for vengeance. And that's where it's so amazing that, oh, what needless grief we bear. What if we only would give it all to God in prayer? And then what Esau said, what is the meaning of these animals, my brother? And Jacob said, to find favor in Your sight, my Lord. And Esau said, keep them for yourself, I have plenty. And Jacob said, no, please, for to see Your face is like seeing the face of God, now that You receive me favorably. Notice that Genesis 32 and 33, they go together. To see Your face is like to see the face of God. And then what happened was that they went to their respective settlements without any bloodshed. The last time we ever see of Jacob was in his deathbed. He was already 147 years old. And he wanted now to give the blessings to his sons. And notice now the way he would say before he gave the blessing. May the Lord before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, who has delivered me from all harm, may He bless these boys. No more manipulation. No more deception. You may say it took God 147 years, but finally Jacob understood that the way to be blessed is not to grab it, but to receive it out of God's grace. And then he bestowed his father's blessing to the 12 boys. And then he breathed his last. And Joseph, his favorite son, was the one who closed his eyes. Jacob's story has just ended. But your story and mine are just beginning. It begins with, what is your name? Shalom to you.